everybody and their neighbor. Welcome back to Gear and Gigs. I'm your host, Jeff Stone. As always, so glad you guys could stop by today. It's kind of a special day around here. We've got, are you ready for this? The very first guest we ever had on our show, the guy who started our YouTube career, Travis Larson, the man with the smooth driving tone, the man whose strange time signatures are no problem for him, the man whose double stops don't stop, the master of arpeggios himself, Travis Larson of the Travis Larson Band. Welcome, sir.
Wow, is that all off the cuff, or did we work on that intro?
No,
that is amazing.
I work only off the cuff. I try not to prepare because, you know, that takes away the spontaneity.
Oh man, well that's fantastic. I wish I had those. I wish I could be as smooth as you are. That was beautiful.
Well, thanks. Let me check my notes. Hang on a sec. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. First guest, huh? I was the first guest.
You were the first one. This 3 years ago was May 9th,
2020 probably, right? Yeah, because I was probably like everybody else going, will anybody talk to me?
Yeah. Oh, I see. I see. A bit of a last resort, was I? Hey, you know, that's fine. I'll take it. That's fine.
Is there somebody out there in the cosmos?
Well, we've talked to a few people since then, but you're still one of our favorite people. So I'm awful glad to have you back on the show, as I'm sure all of our viewers are.
I appreciate that, and I will say that I have kept up with the show, and you guys are doing a beautiful job and providing a great service for nerdy guys like me that want to, like, say, not have to buy every piece of gear, but maybe want to check it out and say, what does this do? How did these guys use it? How can I experiment with it? You know, or can they vicariously, can I experiment through you guys?
Well, thank you. We try to experiment with everyone in mind. So, you know, we don't play a lot of songy stuff. We play a lot of that stuff you do when you get a new pedal and go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's very cool. You guys are definitely providing a service that is appreciated by guitar guys like me. So thank you.
Very, very kind words. Very kind words. Thank you so much.
And I mentioned when we first met up here, and for the viewers, it's not like we had a hour-long pre-conversation. It was pretty much let's just go. But I did mention I saw your shirt, and I on this last new record, I used as a Midas for all the acoustic parts, and it was the first true acoustic guitar that I've recorded, in a studio with microphones, because I'd always done piezos and things like that, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but
it's a spectacular piezo. It's just one of the best sounding acoustic, non-acoustic guitars ever.
Yeah, exactly.
I did try to bring out some instruments for you so you'd at least feel on familiar turf. I've got, Jennifer's style bass here and your kind of guitar. So,
That's a really pretty finish on the blue one, by the way. That's beautiful.
It's a marine blue sparkle. I actually got that guitar because of you, because I've seen you play it and went, oh man, I love that tone. And when I got it, the acoustic part was a complete surprise. I had no idea it was that amazing. I still don't know how they do it.
This is my closest equivalent that I have.
There you go.
But and it's not. This one's more of a matte finish, but it's very
pretty.
Same kind of thing though.
Blue though, right? Is it blue?
It's yeah.
Yeah, very pretty. Very
pretty. It's a darker blue. Kind of got a little bit of a greenish thing going on too. But
well, I didn't have a blue sparkle version of the bass to bring out, her things.
I think those are hard to get now.
I'll cross the two and hopefully we'll make you feel on familiar turf.
When Jennifer's bass is getting to the point where there's not much left on it, but it's,
she plays the hell out of it. I mean, she really does. For those of you who are
number one for 22, 23 years, something like that. And
wow,
I mean,
really?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, she plays the bongo a lot as well. It's getting on this last little run of dates, I think it was about 50-50, but
bongo bass, for those of you who are wondering if she plays percussion, we're actually talking about the Music Man bongo bass.
Yeah, does Jen play the bongos?
Well, she probably does, and we're also talking about Jennifer Young, by the way, the bass player in the Travis Larson Band, which, man, I'm telling you, if you haven't seen her play, it's a treat. It's mesmerizing. She's amazing.
Yeah, she is my right arm, our secret weapon, and my partner in crime for the last. I hate to. I probably shouldn't talk so honestly about this stuff, but it's been like 35 years since we've been together.
Wow, that makes you like what, 38? I think then.
It's
Wow.
odd, right? Because I always say that in that's my bad joke at the monologue every night at a show is I always say, we've been together for, 30 plus years, which is odd because I'm only 35.
I'm sorry, 35. My bad. I added three. My apologies. And the drummer in their band, by the way, so we don't want to leave him out, is Dale Moon, who's a spectacular drummer as well.
Yeah, Dale Moon, no relation, but I used to say no relation, but just as nuts.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, actually, he is a well-behaved human. We don't have to worry about him trashing hotel rooms or anything
He's
like
quite a
that.
gentleman. He really seems very nice and way too nice for you, to be quite frank, but he very nice. Both your
Exactly.
bandmates are just real sweethearts from what I've seen. So,
Yeah, Dale's a way too OCD to be like the previous Moon.
who was the opposite of that? Yes,
Right,
he
exactly.
was anal releasive.
Anal
Wait,
releasive.
wait, that didn't come out right. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Keith.
I
My
gotta remember
apologies.
that one. I like
My
that.
apologies. No,
I'm
I'm
not
so
anal retentive. I'm anal releasive.
well. It depends what how the tacos sit. To be honest,
Well,
it
yeah,
really,
yeah, well, I did have some pulled pork last night for dinner. Anyway,
yeah.
a whole
And
different
pulled pork
podcast.
starts a different joke line. So we're gonna move on. But Travis has got a new album. Has it come out yet, or it's due to be out
It
very shortly,
it's
right?
it's officially worldwide due out through the distribution on the 10th of March.
Okay.
It's we've been doing the pre-release and that's been going fantastic where we did advanced copies through our website, which you can still get. I don't know when this is going to air, but no matter what, go to travislarsonband.com to look for the record because as we as artists know, if you get it from us digitally or otherwise, it's more money to us.
No, it's better quality. If you buy it from the band, it's actually higher quality. Many people don't realize that.
Well, I like that. Yeah, because once it goes through distribution, the bit rates start
It gets
to
watered
plummet.
down, and yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah, yeah. It's not even full waves anymore. It's just kind of like a partial wave.
Right. Like, yeah. 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 Well, I've heard excerpts. I went online and listened to some excerpts. I did do some preparation. I'm not completely unprepared, and just the snippets that I heard already, very very enticing. I got to say a couple things that came to my mind. There's a song called Red Giant on there where Dale is just he's creaming his China cymbal and he's doing some incredible stuff. I mean, as a drummer myself, I really really like that. And what was the one that she starts out with the bass where she's just doing such an incredible bass? Well, I think it's the next to last song on the album.
Maybe Golden West is the second to last song.
Yeah, I think that's the one where she's got a big bass part.
There's a big bass solo in the middle.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
amazing, just amazing stuff.
Yeah,
Great
it's funny
songs.
because we're talking about which ones are going to get played live now and which ones would be the most fun to play live and all that kind of stuff. And it's of course I just did this show last week with Stickman down in San Diego, which was a one-off. And
Hmm.
the reason really to do it, there were two reasons. One is I hadn't seen Tony in a long time, and I thought that would be awesome, and I wanted to see those guys. But I also wanted to try out some of this material, and I started. I learned three songs for this last show, the title track, of course, New Exhibit, and then I learned one called "And Then," which is the second song on the album, which is just uh, basically, I guess what I'm saying is I started mostly with the hard stuff because if you
That's
start
the
with the
way to
hard
do it.
stuff,
Yeah.
you'll have an easier time later when you get tired. But um, and then the last one I learned was the last song on the album called a song called "Will to Wait." But let's start with "And Then" really quick. "And Then" is the second tune, which you mentioned Red Giant, and that's another tune that's particularly jacked up
Mhm.
time wise. The idea was when I first started this record, and you and I had talked over the pandemic, but the thing is, I started the first file I opened to start a project on this new album was in October 2019. Um,
Oh wow.
and being that we ended up being home for so long and having time to deal with stuff. Um, Consequently, in my opinion, this is the best record we've ever done by far
Strong words.
by far. I mean, I'm very proud of everything we've done, and I love the songwriting on all the other records and our previous record. I love that record, but production wise, the improvements are huge. You can it's audible. Um, but I was gonna say the song "And Then," which is a really fusiony kind of weird tune. The idea was I went and saw Herbie Hancock right before the pandemic, and
Mm.
I started out as a keyboard player. Some people know that, some people don't. But when I was, a kid, 9, 10 years old, and we may have talked about this before, but
26 years ago.
right, yeah, when I think the Foo Fighters were just starting, right?
You millennials, I'll tell you.
Right. No,
Yeah.
but truthfully, back in, very early 80s, it was the entertainment business was a different business. And I saw Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea on the Merv Griffin show,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
which is, it's like that would be the equivalent today for anybody watching of seeing like so let's say the Kelly Clarkson show or something in the daytime television, like a talk show, but actually seeing, say Dream Theater or John Petrucci or something
Or the
like that,
aristocrats or
or
somebody.
the
Yeah.
Aristocrats, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
on a show like that. That's how much the business has changed, which it just doesn't happen like that anymore. That's not the kind of stuff that's out there, commercially viable.
Mm.
And so to be able to turn the TV on in the afternoon after school and, mom's watching talk shows or whatever and see Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock jamming together and going, what is this? It was eye-opening. And I was interested in music at that time, but I that was something where, they had like back in those days, you didn't have the same technology you do now. So they had different keyboards for every sound. So it was really impressive looking. You'd see these guys with walls of keyboards like Keith Emerson and stuff, and they were like one guy's playing something over here while he's playing something over here. And that music, to go back to my point of what I try to do on this particular new album, just as a comparison, the last album, Annika, our idea was we were kind of taken more of the prog rock influences that we had had, and it
Mhm.
was a little more of maybe a homage to bands like Rush and Yes,
Hmm.
and things like that we
I
grew
can
up
hear
on.
that in that album. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and the new one, although there is, I'm not going to say every song has this, but there's a thread through many of the songs that kind of harkens back to this fusiony, Rhodes piano, more late 70s, early 80s vibe of,
Mm.
the Chick Corea Herbie Hancock thing. And this tune, and then the idea with it was when I went and saw Herbie play a couple of years ago, they had these bits of the show where they would be on a groove, just like a bass groove, and they're just burning. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, they'd play the most uh, whacked, crazy, long unison, proggy unison section of the whole band, and nobody would even be looking at each other. They'd just be like kind of off in their own world. All of a sudden, it'd be like, and then back to the groove, right? You'd be like, how'd they know how to do that? And I started thinking that's an aspect of my history and my love of music that I have not reflected on my records much. There's
Mm.
always been a little bit of kind of a thing. I would play a lot of keyboards on the records and there'd be some Rhodes in there, but production wise, but not, musically. I hadn't done anything quite that out there. So I really tried to do some stuff. And again, Herbie Hancock and people like that are these guys are giants, they're gods. And my little brain to try and compose stuff like that, it's a lot of work. I'm far from a genius, so I was in here picking away, trying to create some things like that. And this song off the new record, And Then, which is the second track, is really a reflection of that. I posted a few clips of it from the Stickman show.
Mm.
But it's all memorization. And you literally, for me, I have to get to the point where I can even struggle through the song, and then I have to play it like 100 times
So
just
you
to
feel
where,
it, so you just feel it as
yeah.
opposed to having to think it. Yeah.
So you're spending, just weeks trying to learn a few songs. And I haven't honestly, with the exception of some jam songs here and there and stuff like when I just did this little run with Keneally, we played a Beck tune that was one that I had never played. You do things like that, but 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 not, when you're learning complicated music and it's music that you're composing and it's fresh and new to you. Um it's hard to learn if you haven't kept that muscle up, and I hadn't really learned any new songs in 7 years. The last album came out in 2016. So with the exception of some jam songs where it's like, okay, I learned a melody and I learned a couple of riffs. That's not what I'm talking about. And so it's really a lot. And I'm feeling those muscles come back because right now is the time where I'm trying to learn the material. And I'm not a guy that does, I don't do that constantly. Some people do. Some people are constantly churning stuff out. For me, it takes a lot to produce new music. And then when I do, it takes a lot to learn it. And then once I learn it, I go out and play it for a really long time because I feel like I'm still every night there's a chance to get better. And some nights are better than others. So I never get bored of playing older stuff because I don't know. I'm not trying to sound self-effacing, but I don't feel like Phil Collins said this quote one time. He said, Genesis would have been such a great band if we had just a little bit more talent. I feel like no, that really morally applies to me much more than them. But uh, I feel like that. So I feel like once I get that stuff under my fingers, I enjoy playing it so much and the challenge of it every night that I could do that for years, literally, and not be sick of those songs because I'm still trying to get through them every night. So
Oh, well, when you get into the recording thing too, you go from song to song, instrument to instrument, and you keep changing, especially the way you're thinking about the production side and you're thinking about the keyboards, but I'm also thinking about the guitar. But I also have to think about what's the bass doing and the drums and how do we get all this and the logistics, and your brain flips from left side, right side, left side through so many things that by the time you get done, it's like, okay, let's go perform this. You have to almost start all over and treat it like a cover song and go, okay, now what did I do again? Oh yeah, okay. So
it's
yeah,
exactly right.
as you play it with the band, the song grows together like a good stew, right? It starts to become a different, same but a different thing. It gets a life of its own, like you said. So
Yeah, it's absolutely right. Is the way you described it is perfect for people that don't understand. And I know exactly. My mom says to me all the time, she goes, I don't understand why you have to learn it. You wrote it. And so she has a inherent non-understanding of what it is to be a musician, right?
that's what moms do,
Yeah, it's
that's
like,
what they're
well,
for.
mom, writing it, if you're sitting in the studio trying to come up with the perfect idea for 8 bars, you're doing that all day long and you're just
And if it was
running.
particularly inspired, you played it once and then
Correct.
you were done. So you don't have to play it again and again. And then you go back and go, whoa, how did I do that?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and that's the difference between the way things are largely created nowadays and the way they used to be. But it's
Hmm.
also the reason for me personally and my band why we've been able to improve so much because our first two records were essentially live records. And we were playing that stuff in clubs and we essentially went into the studio and just played the stuff and then added a few overdubs afterwards. But you can hear that on those records. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that we got a record out, but that how you understand what I'm saying when you go, "Ah, it's hard to listen to that stuff, it's
It's like the first two Van Halen albums. They were stuff that they played live and they just
sure.
went in and cut it in like, a week.
I will
And
go out
as
on a
it's
limb though and
totally
say
different
those
thing.
two albums are brilliant,
Well,
whereas
okay, but
mine,
no, no, I'm not going to argue over who's more brilliant, but we can agree that they were. But they were also honed over many years of playing in front of audiences, seeing
sure.
reactions, seeing what worked, what didn't. And so when you listen to their later albums, they're more crafted, more thought out, and it's not necessarily worse. It's just different.
Yeah. No, no, you're right. And I have to, being a guy that's been doing this for a while, I also have to reconcile with long-term hardcore followers that, thank God for them. But they love stuff that maybe I am a little bit more sheepish about, and I have to recognize that I do the same thing with guys that I look up to, like Steve Morris and Jeff Beck, and those guys, of course, have records that they listen back to, and they're just like, ooh, and I'm going, oh no, that was the first thing I ever heard. It's amazing, right? So,
Well, they hear
um,
their immaturity or what they perceive as an immaturity, and
sure,
they look at it from the perspective of where they are now. But we have the fond memories that we've carried along and just added their catalog to rather than
yeah,
analyzed.
right,
So
right.
yeah, I get that. I get that.
I feel like as an artist, I crossed a path with being able to have a fondness for my material at a certain point. Like at a certain point, even though, going as far back as say Burn Season, which is
Hmm,
2004, that's a while ago.
good album.
Um, the production on those records is not what we're doing today, but
Yeah.
the playing and the songwriting was getting more up to par, where I can still listen to it and go, no, oh, these kids were burning, that was pretty good. So I can live with that. But so proud of what we've done with this new album, and production wise, how far it's come, through a couple of things that may have just been in initial light as a negative thing, but a necessity. I don't know if you saw this on social media over the pandemic, but we ended up losing our recording studio, our main big commercial recording studio,
Oh,
which was Avalon Recordings, Avalon Digital Recording Studio in San Luis Obispo, California. And we basically, just like a lot of people, got priced out of the building. We'd been there for 25 years, and what we've had to do is sublease the recording studio, and then we have some storage there and a rehearsal room that still resides, but the room is not. It's a rehearsal room. It's some drywall thrown up, and you can go in there. You can make a lot of noise without the cops coming. That's the extent of it. Um, so having the studio that I'm sitting in now, which is Treehouse Studios, which is actually at my home. This is we probably talked about this before, but this is a garage that I've basically converted, where I've built a room within a room and soundproofed it. And
I think you had just put that together when we first talked.
yeah, it was,
Yeah.
and those were, we ended up, doing all the pandemic podcasts from this room. And this is kind of like the workspace for Jen and I. She lives up the street from me.
Hmm.
This band is so much of a real band. We all live within a quarter to a half mile of each other.
Oh, wow. That's
And we've been
convenient.
in this band for Dale's the new guy, and he joined in 96. So
Oh, wow.
it's been a long time, but we basically tracked the entire record in this room that I'm sitting in right now, which is my garage. Uh, Not to say that we couldn't do good work at the other studio. Obviously, lots of people recorded there. John Anderson recorded there. Bella Fleck recorded there. But
Oh, wow.
the thing is, when you're forced to kind of like deal with issues, then you kind of start looking at your limitations too, right? And so although we were forced to maybe deal with a less romantic idea of what a studio is, we were also forced to deal with technology and change up our system and do some things differently, and brought in some other people, and uh, basically said, okay, if we're going to not have the studio that we've been in forever, let's at least try and if we have to change some things, let's change whatever we have to change for the better, and let's try and make this the most well produced and sonic high quality CD we've ever done in the history of this band. And absolutely that happened. So I'm really really happy and proud of that, even though we don't have like the big room and all that kind of stuff. So
Well, I've had my own studio for more years than I will admit to. Long, long time. And
yeah,
it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because you've got unlimited time. You're
yeah,
not on a clock unless you've got a deadline for a release, but you're not on the clock. And if you don't have the gear that you need, you find a way to buy the gear that you need. And, it sends you down rabbit holes and it can get you into the weeds and a few more euphemisms along those lines. But if you're self-disciplined about it, which you guys seem like you are very much that way, man, you can come out of it with a product that you're real happy with, that you are doubly proud of because you did every darn thing.
Well, yeah, and interesting thing too, which of course, everybody's talked about this in recent years, but technology has moved forward so much to where you can, for no money or very little money, anybody can produce a world-class sounding album, right? But the one thing that I've found is that the proof is still in the pudding, as far as, yeah, you could use a bunch of plugins and you can use samples and things like that, and you can make your album sound amazing, but can you produce great music, or music with heart, or something that reflects at least your personality and temperament? And um we could go down this whole rabbit hole of AI music, and that would be another 3-hour podcast, right? But
Yeah,
um
AI scares me. It's the replaceability of everybody by machines is concerning just a little bit. As you can see, I'm
right.
not a big plug-in amp modeling sort of guy. I'm really more into the real thing. And so,
Yeah,
for for me, you know what it was actually? I'll tell you. We're both Rush fans, so I can go into that. And I've seen him a bunch of times in concert. I don't know, 6, 7, 8 times. And the last time I saw him in concert, which was in the Midwest somewhere many years ago, uh, they sounded different somehow. I'd seen them so many times before and I'd listened to their albums. And I'm watching the show and I could not get as engaged as I had in the past. And they were
interesting.
playing great. I could see that they were playing spectacularly. I mean, they were on top of their game. Everything was great. Geddy was singing his butt off. Everything was great. But something about it was going past me. And it took me a while, but I researched what gear they were using on that particular show, and it was a lot of preamps and things going direct. They were having a stage sound, but what we were hearing through the PA was actually a lot of direct stuff. And I'm
Right.
like, oh man, I started to think, I wonder if that's what it is. So I've done a lot of experiments since then, and there's a certain something that comes from air moving, that
Sure.
and real things vibrating, that I think adds to the heart and soul of music. So as soon as we start sucking all that away, yeah, the hoi polloi won't know the difference, but maybe they do subconsciously. But there's an excitement that's lost. So for me, I got to have the real thing. If I'm going to have an analog synth, I could use a plugin, but I'd rather use an analog synth that
Right.
actually
Sure.
have those analog bits whirring inside and all the associated noises and problems and everything that comes with real life. But I've always made sure that I've had the ability to play real amps in a real room and real drums in a real room and that kind of thing when I can, because it can make the difference, at
What's
least from
interesting
just
about
a
that,
vibe standpoint.
yeah, interesting you mentioned that, because for probably around 2007 ish, we started, that was when we really started traveling far, and we didn't have enough of a following in the United States to be able to get in a van and tour to the East Coast without just spending loads of money to get there. And so what we were doing was flying to the East Coast and playing where there was population that would come see us, and using, you know, just direct pedal boards, modelers, and things like that. And Dale would take a set of, his drum pedals and borrow a drum kit. And we did that for several years. And even, in maybe even more so in a small club level, there was an issue where you get people packed up against the stage and all that, and the PA's past them. And so all they're hearing is Dale, right, playing the drums, or they're not hearing us immediately enough in front of them. And so that we were aware of that. And what we did, like we did the UFO tour in 2009, we actually had them, we were running direct like that, but we were running monitors behind us, so that the monitor
Oh,
was coming
interesting.
as if there was a rig there, instead of
Right.
having wedges in front of you. We actually had both, but that's we were putting a like a backfill. And it was really because we could tell that it wasn't connecting. You could see it, people. And then if you go out and, or well, what I could do back then even was I would see like videos posted on YouTube or Facebook, things like that. And I go, oh, you know what? It's just, we just don't sound that good. Like the drums are overpowering the mix. And so, so we started doing that. And then obviously when we started getting in the van again, we started taking big backline, and, thank goodness backline started getting lighter and the technology at least trickled that way. Right. But there's nothing, I just did, like I said, I just did this run in January with my Keneally, and we all took our own rigs, and it does make a difference. You're right. It's obviously a bigger pain to deal with and all that stuff, but it's worth the trade-off.
It is a pain. It definitely is a pain.
Yeah,
And playing with modelers or playing direct is still better than not playing at all. So don't get me wrong, people. I
sure.
still like all kinds of music and all kinds of production. But for me, when I was a drummer, playing, gosh, 90 shows a year, I tried a bunch of different kits. I tried a lot of electronic kits too because of the hassle of acoustic drums and because on smaller stages you can't overpower everybody, or they have to crank it up so loud that now it's actually a pain issue or a
Yeah,
tinnitus causing issue. And the electronic drums, I got them sounding spectacular, but there was still a disconnect. And as soon as I hit a single drum, a real drum again, there's a joy that comes from hitting something and having it make sound right back at you, as
right.
opposed to hitting this and the sound comes over there or it directly in here or whatever.
Yeah,
It's probably a primal thing, it's probably just an instinctual thing, but there was so much more
there's a
joy.
concussion.
Yeah, and same thing with when you play an acoustic guitar, there's a certain joy in just hitting it and it's making the sound right away. I mean, I like
Right.
electric guitar too, and I like amps and all that, but
Sure.
if I'm going to play electric guitar, I'm going to sit here. I'm not going to sit over there or in the control room. I'm going to sit right here if I can because I want to feel it. And it doesn't have to be loud even. I need that direct thing to give me the fizz, you know.
Right. Here's a question for you, being a guy that is a Rush fan, and I am in
Huge
the
Rush
midst.
fan, by the way. Humongous Rush fan.
You and me both, brother. Yeah, Rush. Jen and Jennifer Young and I, our common bond is Rush. When we were in
Oh,
high
very cool.
school,
I like her even more now.
yeah, that's was and is our thing, and we've always kind of applied Rush's law to what we do, which is if there's three guys on stage, or girl in my case, and everything that's being produced from the stage was at least originally produced by somebody on that stage, and say it's even being triggered by them on stage because they're too busy to do something else, I feel like I'm okay with that, because I'd rather, my whole thing growing up on Rush, growing up on a band like the Dregs or the Steve Morris band, bands that sounded bigger than they were,
Hmm.
right? And Steve always used guitar synthesizers and loopers. And back in, I remember in the early days, LaRue was using Taurus pedals too to trigger some piano parts from some of the Steve Morris records. So I actually love that. I love that stuff, and I do that with my band, and always have. There's all kinds of fly-ins and ear candy and pads, and I play tons of keyboards on the records. I started taking a keyboard on the road about 6, 7 years ago, because there's some things that, here's where maybe the line is. And again, this is just my little brain. I'm not criticizing anybody, but I'm just saying in my mind for my band and my music, if there's, say, a complicated part and that is the focal point, say on a keyboard or something, I have to play that,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But if there's a pad or something that's under a guitar solo, then that's something that I can sample and I can trigger, or Jennifer can trigger, or Dale can trigger, or
Hmm.
harmonies to the guitar, even, things like that. And I don't have any problem making the band sound huge as long as we're all three working our asses off and doing a plenty for real. The other kind of law is if all that stuff goes down, the band is still playing. If you pull that stuff out of the mix, we don't all of a sudden sound horrible. We still sound like the band,
Right. Thinner,
right?
but still the band. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I stand on that stuff. So
I
how
agree.
do you
That's
feel about technology and live performance?
I agree. And I know there's a lot of people that to pull off what they want to pull off, they use backing tracks, and I'm not going to castigate them for it. But from a musician integrity standpoint, I have been also of the if it's a sequence, you can trigger it with your foot. A drummer can trigger it by hitting a pad. I got no problem with that, and we're playing along with the sequence, but not a 3 minute sequence, okay? Make I don't want to. I don't want to have the drummer playing along to an entire song's worth of other stuff. Having to wear headphones because he needs to hear a beat on a sequence is fine, but for me, it loses something if we're playing along to a track because as soon as you open that door, as soon as you say we can play the backing tracks, well, then where does it end? I've got good friends that play the backing tracks, and when one of the band members doesn't show up, they've got multi-track, you know, playback units basically. When one of the
Sure.
members doesn't show up, they just unmute his track, and now it's like he's there. And if you've got gigs and that's what you need to do, and you've got unreliable band members or band members that are too busy to show up, and that's the way you need to pull up your show, more power to you. But if you're going to play in my band, you're going to have to learn to play and probably trigger something. And you're going to have to learn how to play something you don't know how to play probably at some
Right.
point in some song. So,
Well, and what you're talking about is maybe a different animal too. I've got friends in tribute bands and top 40 corporate bands and things like this where they do exactly what you're talking about. Like if say one guy can't make it that night, it's almost like being part of the band for Blue Man Group or something. It's like they're going to turn that fader up. But that's a different animal than I am paying tickets to come and see this band that I love play the music that was on their album, right? And
right, because that's why you're going. You want to see the
correct.
magic of it coming to life for real.
Right.
You've already heard the recording part. I'm not coming to the show. I could just stay home and do that. I want to see even if it's thinner, even if it's not done as well as the record, even if it's done differently, there's a certain magic. Even after all these years of playing all these instruments in so many different places, it's still amazing to me to watch somebody else play an instrument. Why
Sure.
doesn't that ever go away? And it's magic because music only exists while it's happening. It's the vibrations in the air, right? And so
Sure.
it's such an ethereal thing that it's that moment you kind of live in that moment that it's there. So when somebody's doing that, it's amazing. And this is why I'm not a big fan. Everybody can have their own opinions, but I'm
Sure.
not a big fan of bands that have a lot of dancing.
Right.
I'm not, I can appreciate a Michael Jackson song just fine. But if he went out on stage and he was the lone singer and a band was playing all that stuff, I would dig that far more than 80 guys on stage dancing along with him. Even if
Sure.
they do it perfectly, that's not the thing for me. I want to see the band produce the song because and I've waxed philosophic about this before, but agreement is hard to get, in the world in general, in relationships of any kind,
Oh,
let
you
alone
think?
there's a shade of disagreement going on in the world right now, occasionally, once in a while.
A little bit.
But But when you're in a band, even if you're mad at the guy that you're standing next to, you've temporarily agreed that we're going to do this in complete cooperation together in an effort to create one thing together. And
Sure.
it's such a human, a magical, I'm going to use the word again, thing that's what I get off on, and so
Sure.
that's why I can enjoy lots of different kinds of music if the people are really playing it and not dancing it.
Right. Just since we're having this discussion and we're both being opinionated about it, I will say I do go out and do solo
You
hits.
dance in bands, don't you? You're a
I,
dancer. I
I,
knew it.
dude, my moonwalk is to die for. Let me tell you. My friends will tell you.
I would pay
But
money to see that.
right, well, maybe you won't have to someday.
Oh, my own free show. Awesome.
Right. It's a special
Yeah.
backstage
Woohoo.
demonstration of the moonwalk. Um, but I do go out. I just did this gig with Tony Levin where I was opening solo, and I will say that that's different too. And the reason I've I've even been willing to do those things. Everybody I know in my little circle of musicians has had to do that stuff, and more so now, just for budgetary reasons. It's either I can play or I cannot play, and I have to play I have to play. I love playing and I have to make a living. So sometimes, like the first guy I ever saw to do a solo electric guitar show with tracks was Steve Morris. And he was opening for Kansas back in the day doing that. He was playing some clubs back in the day. And I was like, I mean, I have discussions like I say with a lot of my friends about this, and Guthrie has done it, Andy Timmons has done it, so not bad company. Guthrie, Steve Morris, Andy Timmons, right? I mean, we all do it, and that is basically just so the people out there in the world understand. Of course, I would want to take Jen and Dale to a one-off that's 6 hours from my house, but it's a one-off, and it's not going to pay for that. And so, but if I have the chance to go see Stickmen for the night and bring some happiness, some people, and get to see a show with some people that I love that I want to see, I'm going to do it, And if I have to play with a jam man pedal, I'll do that. But I wouldn't do it if I didn't think that it was still worthy, and that's different. That's different than like um, I'm still working my ass off at those shows. In fact, more so because it's more nerve-wracking, obviously, to not have my right arm that I've had for 35 years over here. You know, Jen, there's something to be said for having human beings up there when you start to stray off the path too, because number one, they can help you, they can follow you, or they can tell you you're wrong. But
Or
if
they
a
can just
track that,
cover up real quick.
yeah,
We
exactly, they
meant to
can.
do that. Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
totally, dude. Let's just do it once more, and we meant
Do
to
it,
do it.
do it
That's
again.
jazz,
That was
right?
on purpose.
So
Hey,
if
you're
you're
giving
playing
away
with the,
all the secrets now.
yeah, but you look at, like Jen and I can almost telepathically communicate just through our eyes from 35 years of playing music together, and so if somebody's lost, you look at each other, you immediately know, oh, it's me. I'm wrong. I got to find you, or vice versa, But if you're wrong and the track is continuing, it's not going to be sympathetic.
Right, right, right. It doesn't care. It just keeps going.
It doesn't care.
Doesn't care at
On a
all.
good level, it'll nail the rest of the song for you, but that doesn't mean you're going to nail it. You're like, oh, wait, hang on. Where are we?
And we've just turned into a karaoke show, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, just my interjection on because I have been doing a lot of solo stuff, kind of especially kind of like as the pandemic starts to wind down and we can do things, but the budgets aren't there yet, and it's still a little sketchy in some areas. So, and that's kind of how we started. When we started this band, Jen and I, we did it as a duo, but we would go to like a new town and we would do an in-store, and it was like just two pedal boards and no gear, no real production. But it's a huge difference when you start bringing a drummer and PA and a sound guy and maybe, a merch guy and all that stuff. So if it's just the two of you doing an in-store, you can just pull up in a car and then you can go to Denny's afterwards.
And there is a lot to be said for the convenience. I mean, we talked about the lightness of the gear these days, and that's a
Mhm.
that's a big factor. If you can pare down your setup from, a 3 hour setup to a half-hour setup, you want to go do more shows. You're more willing to do it. You're more fresh for the show. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to do that. So I'm not trying to poo-poo the use of modern gear.
Sure, sure.
And as we always say at Gear and Gigs, the gear doesn't matter. It's only there to inspire the player because the audience does not care.
Yeah,
They hear guitar. They don't hear Music Man guitar through, DV Mark amp. They hear guitar,
right,
and you can
right,
switch guitars and they go, oh, now I hear a blue guitar.
right, right.
They don't. And to be fair, when I hear a saxophone solo, I'm not thinking, is that a Selmer or a Kahn? I don't know. It's a saxophone. I don't even know for most of the time if it's an alto or a tenor. I'm just enjoying the saxophone. I don't
Yeah.
know what kind of piano Billy Joel plays. Does he prefer Steinway? I have no idea. Maybe he's a Yamaha man. Maybe it's some brand I haven't thought of.
Right.
So, it's there to make the musician feel good, feel inspired to play. And if backing tracks do that for you, then by all means, use the backing tracks. In fact,
It's funny.
let's just call Dale and Jen up and fire them right now. We're going all to just CD backing tracks. We don't need you people. You know.
it's, it's just not as the beauty of playing with them too, and this is always a running joke, is like when I play by myself, I have to be twice as charming. And
When's
there's
that going to start, man?
yeah, exactly, right. There is a little bit of a truth to that though, because you do have to like if I'm playing with the three of us,
Wow, sure.
there's an added guy in the band we haven't talked about. Um,
He's the guy
but
running the backing tracks.
it's me and myself and Jen and Dale. No narcissism
It's
here, right?
musician math. Just roll with it, people.
Right, exactly. Um, but if I'm playing with those guys, I also I I I relish the chance to have other people on stage that are interesting. That's another thing about this band is it's a band, and especially having, Jen and I have been the front line of this band for decades, and I can feel it when she's not there, and I can feel it when she is. And when she is, I've joked about this for years, but I can see where all the eyes are. But that's okay with me.
She
It's
might be
totally.
better looking than you, maybe from my standpoint,
Well, she's definitely
possibly.
cooler. She's way cooler. Like there's just no getting around that.
She
She's
is
always
very
been,
cool. She commands her section of the stage very well. I mean, I remember the first time I saw you play, within 30 seconds, I was like, well, this is amazing.
yeah.
She's awesome. She's an
She,
awesome player. Her tone, her command of the instrument too. I mean, it's a big instrument,
yeah.
and she just makes it look like part of her.
She's she's the rock and roll in the band, really. Well, I mean, I guess when I say that, she's the real rock and roll attitude. Like if we're Keith and Mick, she's Keith.
Mm,
You know
mm,
what I mean?
mm, mm,
and
mm.
and I when we met, I'm the nerdy teenager in high school that was a little antisocial and practiced music after school. She was the one that was like wearing, like army jackets and back then, like partying and smoking cigarettes and playing rock and roll and being the badass,
She's
and
the real
then
deal. She's the real deal.
and then and she's the one that turned me on to Rush, really. I mean, we were making mixtapes and she made me a mixtape, and it was uh a bunch of Rush instrumentals and like a mishmash of stuff from different albums, and mine was um some some fusiony stuff, and I think the coolest thing that I threw on there was something from Steve Vai Flexible.
Oh well, great album.
That was probably the coolest thing that I stuck on the mixtape to Jen, and the rest of it was like it was cool, but it was for, when you're like a rock and roll teenager, it was probably a little bit jazzy, a little bit light compared to what she was bringing, which was like early Rush and Zeppelin, and I think she was even like she moved to where I am. We both came from Southern California to kind of Central California, but I was here way earlier than she was, and she moved here in high school, and so her development was still Southern California, and she was in like a punk band before she moved here, and again, just the cooler one. And so fast forward to, sure, we're both responsible adults now, and we're in a more polished band, but she's still the edgy one, and she's still the cool one, the cool looking one on stage. At least in
Well,
my
she is.
opinion.
Yeah.
She would argue that tooth and nail if she was sitting here, because she's very humble, but that's the deal is that she's the cool one, I'm the nerdy one, and it is what it is.
So talk a little bit about Dale. What's he like personality wise?
Dale is, well, I mean, again, not to make over compare, but like sort of the professor in a way. He is definitely the guy he's very OCD. He is the guy that um he will he will when we're working on an album, like we just did, he's the guy that's going to wear us down, I'll say honestly, because what happens is he will try every single option he can before deciding on coming back to maybe the original option or what we suggested, right? But he's gonna So he's getting better, but he will circle around something and he will play stuff until I, I I have a lot of patience, but I don't have as much patience as he does to go through something and just beat it to death until like in my world, it's like I don't care anymore, you know. Whereas he still cares. He actually
Right.
gets off on the process. And so that's, in a nutshell, Dale's that guy. He's the guy that will practice every night until he drops, trying out different parts, and then just trying to figure out what he's, how he wants to approach something. And that's stuff that's, I will bring pretty elaborate demos, and it'll be like, it's in this time signature. Here's where the hooks are. Here's where the one is, and working with that, and he'll still try it like I don't even know how many hundreds of different ways, and then come back and go, okay, and it'll be kind of pretty much like the initial idea, but obviously have a human breath to it.
He
But
doesn't
he
have to
will,
wonder anymore. He doesn't have to spend any energy wondering if this is the right part. He can go, now I know it's the right thing, so I can concentrate on just performing that and
right,
perfecting it and not go, because I kind of get that.
yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
little OCD, so I get that.
he's absolutely that guy. He's going to try every angle on something till he knows what's right, and he's uber patient when it comes to that stuff, to the point of, one of the reasons this band has survived, honestly, is the fact that, and Rush was like this too, whatever people's perceptions are, technology has allowed us to hone our own parts in our own space and our own time, and then come back together and say, this is what I've got, and how, and let's check it out. Whereas in the early days, you would be in a room together doing that, and you would always stop short of what could happen because there's only so much energy, right? And so that's one really good thing about everybody kind of having their own studios these days, and laptops where you can record easily and things like that. Because back in the old days, we would work on stuff, and then you're sitting there. That doesn't mean I don't think you're a brilliant musician, I don't love you as a person, but if you're going to sit there and do this thing 400 times in front of me, I gotta go. And it's just, that's just the way it is. It's like, if in anything in life, if we're gonna like work on an engine together, and you're gonna spend 5 hours just trying to like tweak one little spark plug, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna let you do that, and I'll come back. So that has saved us, honestly, as a band, of everybody being able to go away and hone their own parts and come back. And that doesn't mean we don't develop things together. We absolutely do, but we do it in a different way.
So are
So
you the kind of person that you create a demo with everybody's parts in it ostensibly, and then you bring it to them in one form or another, or send it to them, whatever. When you get together to play, how how locked in are you to the thing you've created, or are you the kind of person that really wants to hear it that way, or are you more like, okay, well, that was what it was, and now what is it?
I have a definite vision of what uh I'm going for, with a wide berth of what's possible, and I'm open to those things with human beings. So
Okay, that's cool.
the truthfully, the way it really works is I will do a really, really elaborate demo. And this is only in the last few albums. In the early days, I did demos, but they weren't as elaborate as they are now, because now you have Easy Drummer and all this stuff, and you can really just go nuts and go. And it helps because then you kind of have an idea of, there's no surprises later. You're not like, oh man, if I'd known I was going to add this string part or these three harmonies or whatever, then I wouldn't have done this, or I would have done this. Now you can kind of map it all out and say, this is what it's sort of going to be. Like, say 90%, but then there's room for human breath and personality and all that kind of stuff. But I will say this, so I will do an elaborate demo of everything. Jen and I get together, and she definitely gets involved with arrangements. And we absolutely sit there and go, it's like, that part should go 3 times. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. It should go 2 times. It should go 3 times. And then she's always right. It's like, whatever the argument is. And we'll mess with that kind of stuff. And then we'll basically get all these demos sort of honed where there's an arrangement for sure, like a solid arrangement. And then we'll everybody will kind of go off and start dealing with that. Dale will start working on how to play it for his however many months. Uh, and then Jen and I, usually while that's happening, I'm tracking stuff always. Some of the original demo stuff now can even end up on the record, which does happen because, it's our capabilities of recording are better. So it's not like back in the 80s where you would have to demo something at home and then you have to go to the big expensive studio. We don't have to do that anymore, which is beautiful. So um, certain songs, the solo that I did on the demo that was magical, I'll keep it. That kind of stuff. And that's phenomenal. A lot of the pre-production, like I'll map out a lot of say the ambient keyboardy stuff in MIDI. That stuff will all be MIDI information. That means I can play with the sounds later and change them. So that kind of stuff, the work is done. Then it's just the fun part of, we can sit there and go, let's try this or that. Should this be a violin or should it be like a something weird, like a distorted keyboard, like a Jan Hammer thing? Should it be a string section? You can mess with that after the performance.
Or all of
So
them combined.
yeah, exactly. And some of it is like that.
Yeah.
But so Jen being my co-producer on everything that we've ever done, I'll track my stuff for real and I'll be serious about it. And then she'll check stuff out. She'll come in and she'll be like, she'll be like, that sounds, phenomenal, or you need to do that guitar solo a different way, or, or it's just not quite there yet. It's close,
Yeah.
or the first half is good, and she's got those opinions
Is
and
she gently honest or brutally honest?
she's pretty gentle, but she doesn't have to be. We've been together
Oh,
so long, we don't have to be gentle.
oh, she just heard that and it's all over for you now.
Yeah, right.
Kid
No,
gloves are off.
I mean, sometimes, but it's nothing feels brutal when you're truly creative partners with somebody that you've been with for
Yeah,
that many
yeah,
decades,
yeah.
because it's like yourself telling yourself, I'm
And
not,
it's coming
if
from a
I'm,
place of caring, really
yeah,
caring about the final
yeah.
work.
The one thing I will say about this band is we've been together so long that we watch other bands, even older ones that are like even guys that are, older than us, that are out there that still have band dynamics that we had when we were in high school, that we look at and go, I can't believe they're still doing that. I can't believe they're still, it's like, what is wrong with them? And we don't have that stuff. We of course we have our personalities and we have the stuff that you learn to avoid, or you learn to, and again, a reference to Rush. Those guys weren't perfect. They didn't always get along. I know people like to believe that, but they get along as well as any family gets along. And that's just the reality of working with somebody and riding with them in a vehicle for months at a time and living with them. And that's just life. If, I mean, every relationship, a real relationship is work, of course, but that doesn't, I mean, we love each other to death. And this is absolutely, when I watch other bands, I look at these, groups that you would just, groups that that I won't talk about, that that you'll just go, really? I can't believe how dysfunctional you guys are. What is wrong with you guys? And so, I mean, a relationship is really figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and then just not dwelling on what doesn't work.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's kind of what I'm saying about the working on parts or rehearsal spaces, things like that. If you know that spending 10 hours a day in a room together while the other guy is trying to learn their part is going to drive you crazy, then don't do that anymore. It's
Right.
that simple, right? That doesn't mean you're not making amazing music together. Just figure out how to do it where everybody's still engaged.
As
Um,
long as everybody's priority is still the same thing,
right.
it's all good. And then there's
Yeah.
just different methodology to get there.
Right. And I'm
Yeah.
going to say something now. Can I swear a little bit on this thing without being,
Hell no. No, go right ahead. I got a bleep machine. I never get to use it. Feel free.
and I'm going to say something that sounds immodest, but people know us, and honestly, there's two sides to every performer. There's the reality kid in the bedroom that's scared and thinks everybody hates them, and we all have that. I have that every day. The insecurity of, oh man, I suck. If I was just a little better. Oh, I didn't do a good job. And then there's the guy that walks on stage and owns it, right? and you have to have that guy. So two things. One relating to what I was just saying, which is Branford Marsalis used to say, "There's no better feeling than kicking the out of all the other bands," right? And we absolutely can have that mindset when you're on a bill with like three other bands and you're out there, like, whether we did or we didn't, in our minds, that's the goal. It's nothing against them. It's like, it's to win the audience over. It's to make people just stand there with their mouths dropped going, what just happened?
Mhm.
And if you don't have that, you're never going to be as good as you can be, so it's not an egotistical thing where I'm puffing my chest up thinking I'm the greatest. I'm absolutely sure I'm not even close to the greatest. I've met the greatest. They are amazing.
But people
But
pay to see confidence. They want to see confidence. And if you've got that, not necessarily swagger,
right,
but actual real confidence that comes from a heartfelt place is what people love to see and they'll respond to it.
it's exactly right. And this goes to my second quote, which is Billy Joel, where he said, if you walk on stage and you absolutely don't believe that you're a rock star, they will eat you alive. And he's absolutely right. And I know because we all started somewhere and we all grew up and we all started seeing how audiences' reactions change to you. I mean, Jen and I have played everywhere from like little biker bars where people were beating each other up right in front of us without a stage, and we're
I've played
putting our
that
hand.
bar.
Oh yeah, we all have, right? To playing 15,000 seat arenas. And the truth is, it's all about you being in your own head, in your own bubble, and trying to have that confidence. It doesn't matter what situation you're in. And if you don't believe that you are doing something inherently valuable, or you're not, the best thing on that stage right now, which is a diplomatic way to put it without saying I'm better than everybody else, but you have to kind of believe that when you're up there doing it, because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to be the best you can be. And it's, again, for people that don't perform, that's a hard thing to get across, because then you walk off stage and it's the complete polar opposite. That's where you crash and you go, I screwed this up. I screwed that up. You got lost on this part. What is wrong with us? We need to do better. We need to practice. We sucked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a fine line between self-assured and cocky, and you have to ride that line.
Yeah,
But you also shouldn't berate yourself too much after the show because you
sure,
you had enough strength to get through it. But
sure.
but you're right about all that. And for those of you watching that want some way to relate to this, think about singers that you've seen. You could see some singer, or listen to some singer, I should say, that hits every note perfectly, doesn't miss a lyric, gets everything right, but has little confidence, and it's hard to watch. And you can watch
Yes,
somebody else who comes out, screws up the lyrics, is off pitch, but is super confident about it. David Lee Roth, I'm not necessarily talking about you, but let's use you as an example. We've all seen you just really hose the lyrics and the melody, but your
sure.
confidence was so strong that we still loved the show.
Right.
So it's that belief in yourself that we want to see, because we get a vicarious energy from that,
Yeah.
and we want to ride along with you and not worry
Right.
about whether you're going to fall. You want to worry about the guy falling off the high wire just a little bit. But if you thought that the guy was, literally going to fall any second, you would not enjoy the circus. You want somebody to be confident and show their skill and their talent, and the fact that it's a reflection of the time that they've put into it for your benefit right now. You're seeing months, years, at least many, many hours of work come together just for you, the viewer, the listener, whatever. And that, I think, is it's once again, it's that human touch. It's that connection that we feel, that we long for, that we enjoy. I think that's entertainment.
Right. An example of this confidence and humbleness at the same time is
Oh, well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Oh, sorry. So, see, I slipped right over into cocky. Man, it's a fine line.
right, right. I was going to say Jeff Beck was the epitome of that,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Because we all know he lacked some confidence, and yet
and he would let it both show on stage,
Yeah.
but the, like I remember,
But we also knew he secretly wanted to go work on cars and really didn't want to be on the stage at all anyway. So,
right. But I remember watching him years and years ago doing that song "Brushed with the Blues."
mm,
That, and he walks out, and he was just the epitome of cool. And it's not something that you can explain. It wasn't something he did. If you were trying to explain this to like a young kid that was like, "What do I have to do that?" You have to be cool. But he would walk out, and
yeah.
he does that first pluck in "Brush with the Blues," where he just goes, "Bam," and the whole audience goes. That's all he did, right? And you're just like, oh my God, this guy's so cool. And then he'll go through 2 hours of that where he's just like, just the coolest dude ever and just like so confident. And then he walks up to the microphone and he knows he's the worst musician on stage. He knows that. I'm not saying that's the case, but you
Right.
understand what I
Right.
mean.
Right.
And he walk up, he would be so shy and so he'd be like, Vinny, everybody, and these are the guys, and he would kind of like just stumble over his words, and like it's like these are the guys that are the real musicians on stage, is what he's trying to say, and he would say it poorly, and he would barely say anything, and then he would just be kind of like, thanks for coming, and he'd shuffle off. But like when he was out there, when he walk on, you're like, this guy is just like a monster, and so that's the perfect example of that thing where he would turn it on, but he knew exactly what he and who he was. But he knew it in both ways. He also knew, like, in a lot of ways, like when he's on tour with Jennifer Batten, in a lot of ways, Jennifer Batten could play circles around him. But we all know what I mean when I say that. I mean, Jeff Beck was the guy when it comes to expressing the kind of emotion he expressed, being adventurous, having a vocal, like a voice on the guitar, all that stuff. Just he's a guy that could make you cry,
Oh yeah.
but but uh but he knew what he was and what he wasn't, and that, but it's so awesome to see that confidence and that like self-deprecating thing
Humility. Yeah. The
all in the
humility.
same breath,
The moment, I'll tell you, it's weird, but the moment that he made me, that still just thinking about it gets me to well up,
yeah,
is the Live at Ronnie show,
yeah,
where Tal Wilkinson is playing her bass solo, and at the end of it, he does this,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like she's all that, and you can see the smile on. See, I'm getting all goosebumps just thinking
yeah.
about
He's
the
just like,
smile on
oh
her face, because like, oh my God, Jeff Beck just did that to me, and she knows
yeah,
him more intimately, but that recognition of that,
yeah,
from somebody, from a god, a guitar
yeah, yeah,
god, that he can do that too,
yeah.
because I can't see a lot of guitar heroes being willing to do that to their bass player.
Right, right.
Yeah.
He did all this stuff is popping up recently, and I saw him at a, I forget what year the Crossroads was. It's not the one with Tal. It was a more recent one,
Hmm.
and it was when where he came out, and there's when I saw him in LA on this tour, he had the LA Philharmonic, I think it was, and he
Oh
was
wow.
playing all this orchestral stuff. It was the Emotion and Commotion tour.
Oh, okay.
And so the Crossroads gig from that tour, he just has the keyboard player doing all the orchestral stuff, but he ends the set with this thing, and it's just to watch him in front of a stadium doing this, and like just it's so unbelievable. It's like that's what Jeff Beck is, and it was one of those things where like he he's just soaring. You can't even describe it. And you see it, and he's doing these crazy harmonic stuff with the whammy bar, but it sounds like angels singing, and it's in the stratosphere harmonically, and you're just like, and he's so confident doing this stuff, and it's like that's the thing where you watch him and you just like the whole place just stands up, and to see a whole stadium like that stand up and lose their minds over an instrumental guitar player, like I, I mean, there's some big instrumental guitar players out there, but to see him come out and play something that's beautiful and slow and melodic and get that out of like 80,000 people or whatever it is, it's like it's kind of like the guitar version of Freddie Mercury at Live Aid, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's like something like that where there's just such a level of greatness. You're like, I I don't know if that's ever going to happen again, but it's amazing that it happened.
It's interesting you mentioned Freddie, because they they were both rule breakers. You know, the rules didn't apply to them. They did what they felt, what they wanted to do, and if it hadn't been done before, they didn't
Yeah.
care. They
Right.
just did not care. It came out of them. They wanted to do it, and they were totally confident doing it.
Right.
And once again, you can't help but respond to that. It's like watching a race car driver do something, you know, amazing in Formula One. You're like, what? How did
Yeah.
what? That's
Ma-
impossible. That's and once again, the confidence, the you know, the skill, the preparation that you're seeing manifest itself in that moment. That's yeah. Wow, I
So
didn't think we were going to get quite this deep. That's amazing.
well, so to put this into a category that maybe is usable, if there's any younger musicians watching, how do you get that? Because that's, it's like, well, how do I get that? You get that by playing. And I
Yeah.
mean playing everywhere. I don't care how crappy the gig is. I don't care if you're not getting paid any money. I don't care if you're playing the corner of a grocery store. You play and you play and you play as much as you can play when you're starting out. And that's how that happens. And Jen and I mean, we did that in the early days, just playing every dive and every party and everything we could do. But then also, one of the big things that really helped me hone a confidence, even relating to an audience, was I've talked about this before. Back when they had Borders Books and Music,
Mhm.
uh, Borders Books and Music was connected to Amazon, and we got an Amazon distribution deal early on, and we could play Amazon bookstores.
Hmm.
So we had to figure out a way to do that, which just goes back to the backing track thing. But for in the beginning, Jen and I would get in a car and tour Borders stores to break the ice and try and get a few people into town to know who we were. And you were playing a place where, number one, most people didn't even know there was going to be music.
Mhm.
Number two, they weren't there to hear your music for sure.
Mhm.
And you were playing against the store management, which was like, okay, let's keep it under control,
I'm
you guys.
trying to read over here.
Totally, right? And we did so many of those. And I saw literally, I saw how it changed with how we changed, which was when we used to do those, we started playing them and you'd have like, you know, 6, 7 people would come up and start sitting. They'd have chairs set up and nobody would know who we were. And they'd just kind of like, and we were playing at a reasonable level, probably a level like you're listening to your stereo at home where you can hear it, but it's not like you're not bugging the neighbors, but you can hear it. It's like you're having your own little I'm cooking dinner party or something in the kitchen. So it was, you could hear what we were doing if you're sitting in front of us. It wasn't that polite, but it was polite enough to where we couldn't, it was hard for us to play. It was, you couldn't feel it. And we were always kind of looking around like, can we get these people's attention? I was trying to talk to people, trying to kind of sell us a little bit. And we started getting a little bit, you kind of go through a point when you do something enough to where you cross a line and you're like, we're just practicing. Let's just like do the best we can. And then we would start being inside our own heads and we were just us in our bubble. And I
Mhm.
remember doing that and starting to just be inside the music. And I looked up and there was like 50 people watching once.
Very cool.
And that was literally like we just turned everybody off and we were playing for like an hour and I wasn't even looking. And it was
Mhm.
just us, but we were playing well because we weren't paying attention to anything else. And I learned a huge lesson with that, which was when I'm starting to really feel it, people will feel it.
Mhm.
And so now I know how to turn that switch on and feel it, and that's one of the reasons you have to play and play and play, because if you're uncomfortable, even with the material, even now where I am, new material, I'm still playing this stuff to death because I have to be comfortable enough to feel it. And if I'm thinking too much about it or I'm making mistakes or what's coming next, I'm not really feeling it. I'm executing it.
Right.
And so if I can get to the point where, Dale had a quote, he teaches drums a lot out of a drum school here in San Luis Obispo called Music Motive for anyone that's ever interested in getting drum lessons from Dale Moon. But he says, and I've heard him say this in drum clinics a few times. He says, musicians practice until they get it right. Professional musicians practice until they can't get it wrong.
Mhm. Mm. That's a very good way to put that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's that's what you're trying to do. But for anyone that's trying to figure out how do you have that confidence, play in front of as many people as you can, practice, practice, practice. But then when you're playing in front of people, just it doesn't matter if they're paying attention or not, especially when you're starting out. It's more about the experience and the pressure of people being in the room with you.
Yeah.
And if they don't care, that's okay. You have to figure out, like, what is it that you're doing that they don't care about, and have a realistic idea of that. But don't let it crush you and say, I don't
Right.
want to do this anymore. There's going to be years of I don't care,
Yeah.
you know.
We used to
And
say if we had a bad gig or a bad audience, well, it's a paid practice,
it's exactly right.
and just get into that. And those are some of our ended up being some of our better shows sometimes
Sure.
because
The
your
pressure's off, right?
yeah, your lack of caring of whether you get the engagement somehow comes off as confidence and you get the engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do that even today. I mean, even on a tour that we do, I mean, we haven't toured in 3 years, but on our last tours, you're always going to play in, you're going to play in a Chicago and a New York and a San Francisco, and you're going to play in a Boise, Idaho, and a whatever, Ohio, and a whatever. Sometimes those are the greatest audiences because they don't have exposure to a lot. And sometimes it's hard to pull people because there's just not enough people who know who you are.
Mhm.
Whether that's the case or not, if there's 12 people at a gig in Boise, Idaho, you, number one, you owe it to them and yourself to do a good job. Number two, the harder you try to do a good job, the better you'll be when you get to Chicago.
One
You
of the
know,
ways I found to give myself that was I recorded every show and every practice I ever did. I still have all of the tapes. I can go back and
brilliant.
listen to stuff from high school. So for me, I'm in a lot of ways, I'm playing for my later listening, and it's an anti-cringe sort of a concept, right?
Yeah,
So the whole time I'm playing, I'm thinking, man, I don't want to listen back to this and get mad at myself. I want to be proud of what I did. I want to be able to not I want to be able to maybe even play the tape for somebody else. So I recorded everything. And once I could get the other guys to listen to that too, man, we just started to get better because you're not only hearing feedback, but you're hearing how you didn't work together and when you weren't really into it or whatever. So you start to not want to hear that on the next tape and
right.
or however you're recording it on your phone or whatever.
Sure.
And that when the first time you record it or do a little video of yourself and it's all good, the whole band is good, man, that is such a great feeling because you can't be your own audience any other way.
Right.
And that way at least you get a taste of what it's like to be the audience, but you also get this pride that makes you want to do that again, that well again. Just
Right.
probably like watching football players watching their game tapes. And when they did
Sure.
something spectacular, they want to do it again next time.
Yeah. I've had this discussion. You just mentioned football players, and I've had a discussion lately with a friend of mine who is a very well-known, big, 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 like arena rock band level. And we've been talking about obviously the business and whether kids, I mean, it's all about short attention span kids now and TikTok and all this stuff. And we're like, do kids still have an interest in ever trying to do anything like this or working on things? And I said, well, think about it like this, and this is me being an optimist, but if everybody's watching the Super Bowl, it's like, say, the biggest watched event in America in the year, right? That's a bunch of athletes that are doing a skill that not everybody can do. So in my little mind, I'm thinking, so there must still be a human fascination with people, musicians, anybody that does a skill that not everybody can do, right? So you have to hope that even though there's all these weird uphill battles and the music business is completely in the toilet and it's different now and all this stuff, but the idea that you can go and see people do something in a room in front of you that you can't do or nobody can do maybe, and it's something they've worked really hard on, whether it's sports or music or but something human. I have to think that's never going to go away. It might go through ebbs and flows, but I actually think, and we argue about this, my friend and I, there's going to be a backlash, whereas, they think, oh no, the world is continuing to go this way. I'm like, I don't know. There might be a backlash, like there always is, where everybody gets so sick of being disconnected and technology and all this stuff that they want to see people using human skills again. Maybe that becomes a thing, and that becomes a resurgence of, let's see some people like execute some talents as opposed to dial something up on a device, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's
Yeah.
just my take. I'm always the optimist. Otherwise, I would still be getting in a van. So
Right. And you know so many famous people. I'm racking my brain thinking who you're talking about. I get the feeling it's Jen from Evanescence, but maybe I'm wrong.
I cannot confirm or deny any of these conversations. I'll
This
say
guy
this
knows
about
so many
Jen.
famous people, it would make you sick. He just
I will
hangs with
say this
a
about
lot of
Jen from
crew.
Evanescence. She is one of my dearest, closest people in my life. And
Who have you've done some cool stuff with?
well, and it's kind of a running joke in our little circle because my two best friends are named Jen, right? Like
Right.
the two Jens. But and it's funny, the Jen in my band, I make all kinds of jokes about this. I never get a clear answer on clearing this stuff with her, but we're kind of like the Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks of fusion, except that we haven't had the final breakup, and I don't think we ever will. We're family at this point, but we knew each other since high school, since we were like 15, 16 years old, and we played music together. And then she went off and had a normal life for a minute, and then came back to the band. And then we were, like in a relationship for decades. And then we're back to being friends for, about a decade. But it's to be in a band with somebody, when you talk about relationships, we had a day job together. We were in a band together. We lived together. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the, uh, we looked at each other and it was like, okay, we have to pick one. And we picked the band. And that's kind of, it's funny because all our musician friends are like, that's so awesome. You guys are so badass. you know, it's, we picked the band.
Well, that is very cool. I can definitely ascribe to that theory. That is pretty cool. I think about when I see you guys on stage, and there's a comfort level between all three of you, but especially between you two front people. And it's hard to pinpoint where that comes from because the relationship is so long. But it works in a very entertaining way. You hear very complex, sometimes daunting music coming off the stage, but they're just so in it together for the final result. It's
Well, and the
very nice
thing
to see.
is that Jen and I, like I said, if somebody's tanking, and usually when we're on the road, like Jen will make her share of blunders, of course, but like usually if it's a massive tank, it's me. Usually she's looking at me and she's like holding it down. But the beauty is we could tell, like instantly. It's like look at each other like, is it you? Is it me? What is it? And if it's neither one of us, it's that guy.
Right.
Um, and to talk about the confidence in each other, it's funny because like sometimes the lack of interaction with Dale, being drummers are the unsung heroes because he's back there, he's like the engine, right? And you're not back there worrying about him because you just expect he's the one holding it down. There is a thing that will happen sometimes where if he has a brain fart, it'll trigger us to go in the wrong direction because it's all muscle memory stuff, right?
Sure, sure.
And so if something's different, even if it's a small thing, sometimes, and I'm not saying we don't have improvisational sections, but let's say it's a complicated kind of progressive unison section or something. If something's different, your brain will all of a sudden, sometimes it'll just be triggered wrong. It'll go down the wrong off ramp. And that whenever that happens with Jen and I, we're going back and we're watching the tapes, because it's like, okay, what happened? Oh, he hit a kick drum early or whatever it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff is, that's the adventure of being in a band like this too. And if it was super easy every night, there wouldn't be as much of a, you wouldn't have the reward.
That's why people like us that play fusiony stuff do it, because it is hard
Right.
and challenging, and there's a question of can you pull it off or not.
It's like I'll tell you a story about not a hugely well-known guitar player, but a guy named Dave Martone from Canada. I don't know if you know him. Um,
Sounds familiar, but I'm not drawn to mind.
he's he's got a family now, and he doesn't go out as much as he used to, but he's got a bunch of amazing kind of shred guitar records from about 10 years ago and before that. And great player. Like kind of I mean, I would say he he could have, in the right circumstances, been uh, in a different world, kind of a Guthrie type of thing.
Oh, okay,
He
sure, yeah.
has serious chops, and same thing with a guy like Greg Howe, right?
Hmm.
They just ridiculous chops, endless chops. I watch these guys and I'm in awe of how they can play that much cool stuff that technically, and just not run out of ideas.
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
want to play stuff that hard. I really, there is a limit.
right. Um, but anyway, I was on this tour back years and years ago. It was a sponsored mobile stage put out by Harman, which owned Digitech and DoD and all that stuff back then,
Mhm.
and JBL, and
JBL, yeah.
they had like it was basically like a rolling NAMM show for them. And what it was is we were the house band, and this is when we were just trying to get away to get our feet wet and get out there on the road. And so we got paid to be on this stage and play every day in front of new people. And we would go roll into like a Guitar Center parking lot or a Sam Ash parking lot or something like that, and we would do giveaways and clinics and play a show at the end of the day, like right at dusk, usually before the store closed. And Dave Martone was a guy that had come out as a special guest on a run of those shows. And he had shown up. He wasn't exactly sure what he was in for. He knew he was showing up we were in Las Vegas, and he was showing up to this stage. He was going to do a set. And he showed up and he was wearing, like designer jeans and a nice white dress shirt. And, he was like dressed ready for the show. I think like nice boots on, and he saw what was going on, and he immediately said, "Do you have any gloves? What can I do?" That's the
Oh,
first thing he said to me, and
nice.
I we had like the big leather welding gloves, so we don't crush our fingers, and we're like setting up a huge PA system to do this parking lot show. And he didn't know exactly what it was, and he didn't have to necessarily be doing that either. But he just pitched right in, and I didn't necessarily have to be doing it either, but that's just, it's we're all going to like make this happen, and we're going to take the weight off the other guy. And so people like that in this business, and Dave LaRue is a guy like that with Steve Morse Band and
Mhm, mhm,
Dregs. We've toured together several times in those levels, and he's a guy that will work, and he knows what it is to work. And
mhm.
I love that, because when you're like a guy like that, Dave LaRue, Stu Ham, Jeff, I'm having a brain fart right now. Jeff Berlin,
Mhm.
like that level of, say, a bass player. I don't know. I'm just listing bass players, but say legendary guys, and you're still willing to put the gloves on and get stuff done. That's a huge, to a guy like me when I was coming up. That is an example of what it is to be that. Steve Morris is absolutely that. Something, going back to Jen Majura, my dear friend, where we talk a lot about that kind of stuff. It's like if you you can't experience euphoria if you don't experience the trauma of, is this going to happen? Are we going to do this, or am I going to pull this off? Or the work that it goes into making it happen, all that kind of stuff. And that's why you see a lot of bands get to a certain level and kind of become watered down, because they don't continue to dig, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
with a band like mine, I absolutely don't have a choice. We're playing non-commercial music in an age where it is what it is. If I had started doing this in, say 1978, maybe I'd be a different person. I don't know. I doubt it, but who knows? Because maybe I would be coming at the pinnacle of this thing. But when we started doing this, Jen and I graduated high school in 1990. And what happened in 1990 and 91? All of a sudden, Nirvana took over, guitar solos went away, the entire grunge movement moved in. I know everybody says this, and I don't even say that in a bad way anymore. I just say that in a way of it's a factual thing, Joe Satriani went for a while there from playing arenas to theaters. I
Mhm.
mean that's the reality. So it was a different world. That happens. Art changes, and but when we started, we were doing that. So there was nowhere to go. Our whole decade of even learning how to do this was a decade where nobody wanted to hear this. There was no place to go but up. We were like, they're like, what are you doing? You don't have a singer, that kind of stuff. And you never hear that anymore, and now there's almost a resurgence. This is the first generation of kids that I've said this many times, that actually, some of them at least, like and listen to what their parents listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Like guys like you and me raised kids that they actually thought, oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't like what my parents listened to. I still don't.
No, no. But I am
I mean,
force feeding my daughter Van Halen and Rush and Journey, and
yeah,
yeah, I'm making her listen to all that. And she didn't want to at first, and now she's coming back going, those are pretty good songs. Oh, you
yeah,
don't say, huh? Huh?
right,
You got any
right.
more of that? Oh, I do.
And my parents were, they were the most uncultural and just fed by whatever the media was giving them back in, 50, 60 years ago. And so their idea of music was whatever was on, I mean, they weren't, I don't even know why, but they weren't the people that went down the Rolling Stones Beatles trek. They literally, their thing was more like watching the Sonny and Cher show or listening, whatever it was. And
Yeah, Barbara Streisand,
Tony
Tom
Orlando and Dawn,
Jones, yeah, all that. Yeah, yeah. Which those
like,
are all great. Those are fine.
sure, sure,
Wonderful bands. But yeah, yeah, it is funny. My mom is a perpetual teenager when it comes to her listening taste. She listens to whatever the kids are listening to and always has, but then promptly forgets it when the next one comes out. Has no fandom at all. And my
right,
dad was news radio. Just he
gotcha.
listened to nothing but talking heads, and I don't mean the band. I mean just people talking all the time. I'd get in his car. I'm like, all your stations are just people talking, Dad. Well, yeah, you got to keep up on stuff, but music, he just couldn't. Had
Some
no
people
value for
just
him.
don't attach to that, and I think there's a lot more in that generation. Maybe, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on with that generation. I know we are dealing with a lot of stuff now, but for anyone that's a little bit older, people say, "Oh man, it's so awful now." I don't want to get into politics, but I do feel like this is growing pains where things are still changing, but it's not it's not what it was back then. I mean, there was some different stuff going on in
Technology,
the
right? It's
60s.
technology, social media, computers, essentially. It's
Yeah,
computers that change the world. And yeah, it's growing pains. We're getting used to the idea of working with machines
yeah,
so quickly and so easily. Everything is so much easier that it
right.
changes the dynamics of everything. I mean, we're thousands of miles away right now talking in real time,
Yeah,
and even 12, 13 years ago, even 10 years ago, that would have been like, what? You're doing what? You
yeah.
know? So, yeah, it
It's interesting because
is an interesting time.
being able to play with musicians all around the world, not in real time necessarily, but being able to do projects. That was one of the things that happened a lot over the COVID, thing was all of a sudden there were all these people in our world that were coming together and doing things that they wouldn't have done otherwise. And that was a really cool thing to see, like I mentioned my friend Jen Majura, who was doing these 1 minute jams just to kind of cheer everybody up. She had like every rock star on the planet doing these things with her, and they would just do some, kind of like guilty pleasure 80s pop cover, but like two of the most like shreddy, she'd get on there with, Nico McBrain or somebody and play like, like she had uh was it Richie Kotzen did a Huey Lewis song with her, things
Oh,
like that.
wow.
So
Wow.
but that kind of stuff was really
Yeah.
a cool aspect of that, and that
Mm.
that technology kind of moving forward in a positive way where, like, you're right, we can sit here and have a conversation And that in itself, being able to converse with people from different cultures further away, that's one of the beauties of touring, I've always said, of being a musician on the ground. And when I get into discussions, rarely, but say political or otherwise with people, I say, I'm going to steal this quote from Henry Rollins, but he says, knowledge without mileage is bullshit.
Mm.
Which basically means if you haven't walked in on the ground there and you haven't seen those people and really talked to them, looked them in the eye and understand what they know and where they're coming from, whether it's naive or not, there's still a reason for it. So everybody has their own worlds and their own bubbles. And if you get on the ground as a musician and you travel, you start finding out that everybody's kind of the same no matter where you go.
Yeah.
They're really just trying to have a good life, have love, have enough food and shelter. And that's really all it is. And when you start taking those things away, that's when things get ugly. But that's really all anybody wants. They just not even necessarily to be happy, but just content and have a safe and nurturing environment. That's the human condition, right?
Yeah, it is.
So being able to speak with guys like you and anybody in the world, like say my friend Jen who lives in Germany, I talk to her all the time because technology,
Yeah.
right? So that's in that way it's good. Go ahead.
I was just saying, that brought up two ideas for me. The first one is, does Henry Rollins ever say anything that isn't full of piff and philosophy? I mean, it seems like you could just quote that guy all day long. He seems to have a basic understanding of the world that a lot of us lack, and a really succinct way of putting ideas out that click. So I'm always fascinated whenever I hear anybody quote anything from Henry Rollins. The guy's just a very interesting person.
Well,
But
another person, there's varying degrees of influence in my life, non-musical. Even so, Steve Morris is a huge one of just even how to do this, whether and not just the music part, but Steve Morris was the only guy that was playing clubs and flying a plane when I started playing music.
right,
Like
that's
just
really doing your own show.
figuring out exactly how to work every angle and make it work and figure out, cost and affordability and what is possible and how to put things together. And then Rollins, as far as a guy that he basically works to travel and he puts all the money he makes into the ability to travel, whether he's working or not. So if he's not working, he's still traveling. And he's not traveling like I'm going to go sit on the beaches of Maui. He's like, I want to go find out what's going on in third world countries. I want to find out why these people hate us. I want to find out why this place over here thinks the way they do. And he goes to places that you and I would never go. I'll be quite honest. I'm not that adventurous,
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll go to some places that are sketchy for sure, but there's a limit. And he's a guy that will show up to a village in Africa with like a bunch of like supplies for the kids and like soccer balls and stuff, and then just learn about the culture.
Maybe I just need to bulk up, and then I'd feel more confident about going around to those kind of places.
Right?
People like us, we're a little bit more frail.
Yeah, well, no matter how big you are,
Oh,
those
Henry.
bullets still penetrate, So.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. Henry Rollins, I get the feeling he could just kind of flex a peck and it would come off.
But there is a level of inspiration there in my life
Yeah.
for sure, which is getting to know people, not shutting them out, but getting to know them.
Yeah.
And one of the things, if there's a place, a good example is, without specifics, let's say there's a bunch of artists that are like saying, I'm not going to go play this place anymore because those people, the way they think and the way they act. Well, if you want to try and bring the world closer together, that's where you should play 3 times this year.
Interesting.
Right? I'm not going to stay out of this, say, I look at these people and I'm just like, these people don't know anything and they don't have any culture and they're prejudiced against whatever it is. Well, that's exactly why you should go there.
Yeah.
Like go there and spend time with those people and talk to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the beauties of getting to do this is being able to learn and meet people. But again, the take home is that everybody is basically the same. We're all
They really
humans,
are. They really are.
and a lot of people forget that these days. And that's what music is the big bringer together. It's the universal language, as they say.
So that brings me back around to the second point I was going to make earlier, which is now that you've got the album done, what are the imminent plans for the band over the next 6 months?
Well, it's funny you say that. It's more like the next year, but
Okay.
the next 6 months is we're on a slightly different time schedule than we would normally be. On the last record, we literally had the tour and everything booked when the record came out. Um, in this climate that we're dealing with, I'm looking at a lot of different possibilities and kind of weighing them and waiting to get answers before I make decisions. But I will say that you will see us touring North America by the fall in some capacity. Uh, you may see me touring before that in another capacity. We'll see. Still playing Travis Larson material, but and then also looking to break the ice overseas a little bit. And so I'm completely utilizing my friends in Europe to try and start making this kind of stuff happen, because that's something that we've overlooked for years and we need to stop that. And I know right now Europe is having a hard time with a lot of issues. So may take a little while to get that happening, but that's something that we're not going to let fall on this record. We're going to definitely at some point cross the pond and play music. And
Well, it's good. Yeah.
I probably will be doing that this summer, even by myself, just to kind of break the ice and get things happening. But
You have a strong appreciation for really good, well played music and instrumental music over there, so you
yeah,
probably do really well.
yeah. I mean, we toured North America on various levels from, and I mean, again, we've been touring for years, but I'm talking about a solid tour of the United States, Mexico, and Canada.
Mm.
We did at least all of the states, not all the states, but across the states, um, 2014 to 2019, every year. I don't think we missed a year in there, and various different versions of that. And several of those were the aristocrats, and that's where we really got to expand, because obviously having, the god in the equation gets a lot of attention, and that helped a lot, and those guys are
You mean Brian, of course.
right. Well,
Hey,
they're
to
all
me, that dude is a god. He's just amazing.
they're all gods in their own way, right?
Yeah, well, Marco's pretty dang amazing too. They all are, really.
They
They're
all
just
are.
disgustingly amazing.
They all are. But there was a thing when they started, there was this definitely this kind of surge of Guthrieism that overtook the world, and
A surge of Guthrieism. I like
and
that.
so
That's good.
that was good for all of us, because it got people out and we were built and built. And so starting doing runs with those guys in 2013, I think. We were all They were just starting as a band and kind of feeling out stuff, and then that kind of got bigger. And then the last one we did, the we were playing like sold out theaters and bigger clubs, and we did, the US, Canada, and Mexico. And then in between some of those tours, we were doing our own dates mixed in with dates with Andy Timmons and Tony McAlpine and Keneally and Morris and all these guys that we could we got really good at setting up a whole tour of ours and then having sections of it be with other people like that, so
Yeah.
that we would stay out for 2 or 3 months, but then have these little pockets of getting to play with other great players and get to hang out with friends too. So that's kind of more what we're trying to figure all that stuff out right now. How are we going to do this? How are we going to put it all together? And what is available out there? Because a lot of the venues have changed too.
Mm. Plus, there's a backlog of bands that want to get out and play that haven't been able to play for the last few years, so the gigs are in high demand as well.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we should have some news soon.
well,
But
good, good, because
yeah,
for those of you that haven't seen the Travis Larson band live, I mean, they're great on record, they really are, but live, it's really something to see. They make the
well, thank you.
songs just live and breathe, and they play their hearts out.
No, I
Clearly, I mean,
appreciate that,
you can
man.
tell they're really into creating that magic on stage for you. It's really something. From the first time I ever saw you guys, it was like that way.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, again, just for us, it's all about actually having a real chemistry, and that just comes with hours. That's why I tell people they just got to play and play and play, and don't sweat the little stuff. And when I say the little stuff, I mean like, the stinky feet in the van or whatever, stuff like that. Or if you're, if your band members have some quirks, you're just starting out. As long as everybody's on, like you said, as long as everybody has the same goal of delivering this music the best they can, then the fact that the one guy, like, makes a lot of weird noises when he chews or whatever.
These are very specific things you're bringing up.
You'd be surprised at how much people, in other bands I see, it's like they get so irritated with something. It's like a bad marriage. It's like, I can't stand hearing her talk about this thing anymore, or whatever. And it's like, who cares? You're getting out. I remember Gary Hoey and I had this discussion 30 years ago about uh, a band member where it was like, you're playing rock and roll, you're traveling the world, you're getting to meet tons of people. People adore you. It's not like you work, when you're working. I when I was a kid, my dad was a commercial fisherman.
Mm.
And you don't get people showing up on a commercial fishing boat and telling you they think you're incredible.
And you want to
And
talk about weird smells.
right, exactly. Yeah. And my grandpa was a mason. He came over on literally on the boat from Sweden, and didn't speak any English, and was like a brick and rock mason building houses. And that's that's not, you know it's a thankless job in a lot of ways. Not for yourself if you take pride in your work, which you always should, but again, this is a job where everybody's showing you the appreciation for all the work and travel and everything you do. It means a lot. It means everything when you have people coming up going, thank you for, doing this, and thank you for helping me through a hard time or whatever it is. And so that stuff is not lost on us ever. And it's not lost on us that we work our asses off either, but there's a reason you do that. And the feedback is not something that you get when you're doing maybe a different line of work. And I
And
have
it's
done different lines of
super
work.
honest feedback, and it's immediate. You get a job review every night you play.
Right.
So you know whether or not you stunk up the stage or you didn't.
Right.
And
Exactly.
hopefully you learn and you grow from that as you guys have, and you come together as a band and ignore each other's foibles and find each other's strengths and find a way to cope. And nowadays everybody's got a phone, and some earphones, you can ignore the guy snoring over there if you have to
Yep. Yep.
with the
And
stinky
time
feet
also
and
gives you
your.
people you trust. That's the thing is, we talk about, Jennifer Young and I. She is honestly, and I'm not saying there's not a million people out there that are great ears and great engineers, but she's the only opinion that I truly trust, meaning enough to walk away from.
Mm.
This last record, she was completely involved in the whole mastering process and
Mm.
all that stuff. And it's like, if I've got stuff going on, she's the one that I trust her judgment, and I can come back to it. I'm not going to be like, this isn't right or that isn't right. And you could give it to the best engineer in the world. That doesn't mean they're going to have your vision.
Right.
So, having people that you have time and history with like that, that you can trust, that they understand exactly what we're doing here. So
So we're going to put links below for your website and a place to get the album. Once again, the album, the exhibit,
the new exhibit,
new exhibit. Oh, of
the
course,
new
it's the
exhibit.
new exhibit.
Yes.
How can I get that wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I go online, buy it, check it out. It's amazing stuff. Are you going to do some videos as well?
Yeah, we have there's a trailer out for the album right now on YouTube.
Mhm.
If you go to our YouTube channel, and eventually, yeah, we will get to where we're doing some actual musical videos. I so far I'm the one that's like done the woodshedding and knows how to play the stuff, and Jen and Dale are still working on a few other things. And so once we get to where we're actually like putting this whole thing together, and we can actually play music. So, but that is coming. We're definitely working on all that right now. The discussions are happening and schedules are being figured out, and we will let everybody know as soon as we can when
Yeah,
we're
when you
coming
get
to a
tour
town.
dates, let me know and I'll put them down below as well so people can reference this interview and find out where you're playing. It's worth going to see. Live music's always worth going to see, but in particular, these guys do a
Oh,
spectacular job of making it a wonderful, wonderful couple of hours.
oh, thank you. TravisLarsonBand.com is always that's the hub. Travis Larson Band, LARSON. That's the place to go to find out all
It
stuff
sounds like a
Travis Larson
country
Band.
band, but it's not.
Yeah. That lets me know you're not a newbie.
It's a running joke. I'm not just, giving them a
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
time.
I'll say this really quick. You know, my friend Larry Mitchell, he's a
Right.
great guitar player, East Coast guy, uh, black
Phenomenal
guy,
player.
cowboy hat, dreadlocks. And
Yeah.
and and everybody's like when Larry and I go out, he's like, you got to get a cowboy hat. If I get a cowboy hat, I'm a guy named Travis wearing a cowboy hat. Then it's just all over.
It's just right on the nose there at that point. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm in Texas and still that would be, yeah.
Yeah, if when I go to Texas, people see Travis Larson band, sell the place out every time.
Go down and get
I
some
do love
ribs.
playing Texas, I got to say.
Yeah.
We've had some
Well,
great shows in Texas. There's some guitar fans in Texas.
yes, they do love their guitar here in Texas, and we're in a big guitar area. I mean, I live not too far from Andy Timmons, and
Yeah,
a lot of those cats, I get to see him play all the time. So,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm jealous. I don't get to see Andy play as much. I still have one of his B rigs at my studio here, and we're still going to do something one of these days.
such a sweetheart. Love that guy. Just
Yeah,
love that guy to death. He's awesome.
yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. I can't thank you enough. It's been a lot of fun, as always. We always have a good time talking. And, he and I would gladly talk another couple of hours, but, we got to make a YouTube video, and you guys aren't going to watch too long if the first number's too big. So we're going to stop there. But you'll come back?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
We'll
I'll
have
come
you
back.
back.
When I have more more stuff to talk about post touring about that.
Okay. All right. Post tour, mid tour, next Tuesday. You're welcome to come back anytime, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you for doing a show like this.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. And it's kind of nice to come full circle after almost 3 years to our first guest and have him back on. I want to thank all you guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all that housekeeping stuff. You know how to do it. It really helps us out a lot. Leave some comments below. Tell Travis what you think about his fusion band. And if you want him to do a country song, I think he actually did one with Jen from Evanescence, if I'm not mistaken.
I did,
And yeah,
actually.
yeah. So we'll maybe I'll get lucky and put a link down to that. And in the meantime, I want to say thanks for everybody coming. And for Travis Larson, I'm Jet. See you later.